And so the very first constructs, there's two constructs. The first is I got to put everything in my life and I want to make improvements all over. I get it. Don't go there. It's going to take up 80% just sustaining getting the food on the table for the kids, getting the groceries bought, doing you got to do that stuff or things unravel. And you got to be okay that says, look, 80% of my life I'm playing defense. When I go on offense, have a singular focus and say, look, for the next 3 months, right, it's all about this.
Have you ever heard the phrase becoming the best version of yourself? Yeah, me too. But what does that even mean, and how do we become that person? I'm here to help you navigate through those questions and come up with actionable steps in order for you to live your best life. We've got to discover what we want. We've got to figure out a plan on how to get there, and then we have to go. We can't just sit and wait any longer. Life won't wait on us. So come join me on this constant journey to become the best version of yourself and to find your best you. I'll see you on the other side. All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Nick Carrier's Best You podcast. As you guys always know, I always say I'm fired up for this interview, but that honestly doesn't even begin to describe how I feel about the interview that I've got going right here. I've got the one and only Chris McChesney with me today. Chris, I appreciate your time spending with me today.
I'm excited to do this, Nick. Thanks.
Yeah, definitely. So Chris, if you guys don't know who he is, he's a best-selling author of The 4 Disciplines of Execution. He's a highly sought-after speaker and thought leader. And currently your role is the global practice leader of execution for Frankl. And, we're going to get a lot into the 4 disciplines, personal performance, your own experiences with the disciplines, working with other companies and organizations and trying to implement them for yourself as well. And maybe how, other people can utilize those into their own life so they can max out their own performance, right? But actually the way I want to start today is talking about a little bit of my own passion, like very targeted towards kind of what you work for. Is one of the couple ideas that I've been obsessed with is how we can follow through with the promises that we make to ourselves on a higher level. And also because I think a lot of us know what to do in a lot of certain situations, but we don't do what we know. So I'm always been trying to figure out why, how can we make those things or execute those things at a higher level. And a couple of ideas that I've kind of come to is number one is belief and certainty, in the sense that I need to know that whatever action step I'm going to do is going to yield a particular result. I need to have that high level of belief or high level of certainty. And then the other thing is simplicity, basically, because I know I've heard a lot is that complexity is kind of the enemy of execution. If you don't know, if it's too complex and you don't know where to start, then you're never going to get started in the first place. Or maybe you start, but then you lose track of where exactly you're going. So those are kind of two of the ideas that I've come down to. So I know we're going to get a lot into that, but I just kind of wanted to lay that foundation real quick. But I also know you started working for Stephen R. Covey back in 1991. And I was really interested when you started talking about a story, how you worked for him for about 4 months before maybe he knew that you worked for him or that he knew that you were part of the company. So I wanted you to kind of start with that story a little bit.
Funny. Yeah, it's funny. I have to do this disclaimer because there's actually an episode of Seinfeld where Kramer goes to work for a company that didn't hire him. And I have to acknowledge that because people think I'm just making up the Kramer story, but I did this before Kramer did it. So I first pretended to sort of work for the newspaper, and that's how I got the interview. And thankfully the newspaper published the article I wrote, even though I didn't work for the newspaper either. And then I talked them into an internship that I didn't need. And then I just sort of hung around, and they forgot that they hadn't hired me. So 4 months in, I got called into HR and they said, look, kid, we could be sued because there's this thing called minimum wage laws, and you can't just show up here. But unlike Kramer, they didn't fire me. They offered me $6 an hour, and that was 1991. And
oh my
that's
gosh!
how the journey started. But you know what? I was hell bent that there wasn't anywhere else I wanted to work or anyone else I wanted to work for. And it's amazing when a person really, there's a level of commitment once you decide. There's a no matter what switch. And once the no matter what switch goes, things have a way of falling into place. It's a bizarre.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of related to what you were just talking about. And by the way, let me just say this. I really liked how you started the program, that first idea that there has to be some result, some cause associated with every action. Human beings don't like futility. And in the absence of that connection, it starts to feel futile. And that's where human beings will shut down. You watch where people quit in various phases of life. It's the minute they start to feel futility. And the other thing that you brought up is simplicity. And there's a whole bunch that we've learned about that one as well. And there's reasons why we don't make it as simple as we should. But yeah, those are two huge themes in the execution space.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, and it's honestly just come from my own awareness of trying to figure out when, like I have a whiteboard in my room that I always give like what I'm going to do on that day and like what my goals are and how I'm going to get to those. And when I haven't done certain things, I'm like, why did I not actually do that? And a couple of things that I've come to is that I didn't truly believe deep down that was actually going to move the needle into getting me to that particular goal. So that's kind of how I guess I came to that.
Can I give you a word? And I don't know if this is helpful or not. Sometimes words are helpful. Sometimes when you take an idea, what do they say, that the definition of, or the beginning of wisdom is the definition of terms. So the word that we've sort of backed into is this idea of a winnable game.
Mm-hmm.
And do you really, I mean, you might have made a plan, but when you look at it, do you really believe that it's a winnable game or not? And if you do, your likelihood of follow through goes way up.
Yeah.
And if you're not quite sure it's a winnable game, keep working at it. You're not there yet.
Mm-hmm. I think, that's moving into discipline 3, but I kind of want to stay there since we jumped there. So winnable game. And basically it means that you believe that whatever you're going to do is going to has a chance of success, a high chance of success, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think that is really hard for a lot of people to be honest with themselves. Like everybody says dream big, set lofty goals, but there are some people who say don't go too big. So talk about how we can put a finger on deciphering what a winnable game actually is for ourselves and what's actually achievable.
All right. So let me frame up the question. So if the result is the lag measure and what we define in discipline 1, or what we sometimes call a WIG, a wildly important goal, right? And let's stay with weight loss. That's the most universally understood dynamic that there is, okay? And so let's say, and we really lock it in. We say we are going to go from 195 pounds to 180 pounds, 15-pound loss by October 1st, right? So basically in 4 months, we're going to drop 15 pounds. All right, that's the lag measure.
Right.
The lead measures are the things I'm going to measure that I'm going to act on that I believe is the bet to get me back. Now, I either really believe the bet or I don't. And sometimes we never, okay, so let's say the bet is that there's a certain number of, this is your wheelhouse, right? You could create a better bet on the spot than I could, but there's a calorie count or there's a diet change, there's a certain amount, but it's got to be measurable. It's got to be trackable. That you say, okay, we're going to do this and we think we're going to get this. So now we got discipline 1, we got discipline 2, which is the thing we're going to do. Discipline 3 is just how we see it.
Mm-hmm.
So discipline 3 is how you get it up and how you look at it. But what's sometimes missing, and Nick, I think it goes to what you were talking about, is this moment of honesty where you have to ask yourself, do I really buy it? And it's a two-part, and it's a two-part answer or a two-part question. There's two things going on. The first is, will I really do the lead measures? Do I believe I'm capable of running that many miles a week, burning that many calories, eating that? Do I really think that can I really get there? And if I do, here's the second part. If I do, will it get me the results?
Right.
Now, that sounds like the most obvious common sense thing in the world. But human beings, while they understand common sense, we're not huge on practicing it.
Mm-hmm.
And so whatever the circumstance, go outside of weight loss. This is what we try and get leaders to do. Leader might be executing a business strategy. There might be a dozen different teams that all make up parts of this objective. What we look for, does each team buy the bet? Right? And they'll sometimes lie to you. They don't know that they are, but they want to be the good soldier. Do you like where we're going? Are you on board? Yeah, boss, I'm on board. I don't want to be a pain in your neck. But they may not buy the bet. And if you just frame the question a little bit differently, that you say, honestly, does this right now feel like a winnable game? Do you feel you can do it? And if you did, you'd get the result. And sometimes in that pause, people will go, where they wouldn't admit before that they weren't on board, now they'll sort of go, I'm a little nervous about, okay, now, thank you. Let's talk about that. But let's get the bet right.
Is a way to
that's the construct. That's really the heart of the issue right there for us.
Right. And you described it, I think, without going into a couple of the terms, but lead measures, you have to believe they're two things. They're predictive, that they're going to actually get you to that particular end result, and then they're influenceable, that you're actually capable of getting the things actually done. So I want you to just
and Nick, that's everything else hinges on that construct right there. And it's a human, and it's not just an organizational idea or a business idea. Like the people you work with the goals, those two predictive, influenceable, those two variables are always in play.
Mm-hmm. No, so like for me, this was one of my biggest aha moments when I was going through reading your book and listening to your stuff, because I think that, yes, those are important questions to ask. But then for me, I think a really important question to ask is, how can you increase the predictability and the capability of the actual lead measures coming through? Because this is actually an idea I thought of beforehand in terms of trying to increase your belief or increase the certainty that your action steps are going to yield a particular result. And I think one way to do that is being surrounded by somebody who is more of an expert in that particular area or has more knowledge in that particular area. So that's one thing that I try to communicate with people in terms of weight loss is it's like, if you don't know in this sense, lead measures to get you that particular point,
right,
get yourself around somebody who can help you define what those stepping stones are that are predictive of what your goal wants to be. So have you guys found that in kind of working with different organizations of like how do we actually increase those two different things, and the capability and the predictability of lead measures following through?
All right. So here's what we've seen. We have never published a list. Even though we've worked with 100 hospitals and 1,000 hotels, we've never published a list of the lead and lag measures because there is no list. It's very individual. So for instance, one team may know what to do to get the number of out of stocks in a grocery, the number of holes, right? They know what to do. They're just not doing it. That's a great lead measure for them. Mm. Another group of grocers, they're not exactly sure how the flow of groceries work. They're not as experienced, so they don't know really what to do. So you can't give that second set the same lead measure because it's not influenceable. They don't, right? What's influenceable? I'll give you another example. Let's go to sales. Okay. I want new accounts as my lag, and my lead measure is first time appointments with someone, right? And I watch Jake, and Jake's really good at what he does. And Jake focuses on first time appointments. He gets business. So I go out and focus. So you think of the lead like a lever that moves the rock, right? So first time appointments get me the sale. Well, here's the problem, Nick. The guy that's really good, he's strong enough to move the lever. You might not be. Like maybe this sales guy's been at it for 20 years and he knows what to do. He doesn't even know how he knows it, but he knows how to get those first appointments. You go out there, you can't, right? For the experienced sales guy, that lever moves that rock. But for everybody else, for the other 90%, they pull on that lever and it doesn't move. So that's an example. Let's stay with this. That's an example of a highly predictive lever. Right. But it ain't very influenceable. Then we go the other way and we say cold calls. Anybody can do cold calls. So we get a really long lever and anybody can pull that lever. But if you've ever done cold calling, you know it doesn't always move the rock.
Right.
And you're bending the lever. That's highly influenceable, but it ain't predictive. And so you start to play with these two ideas. To your point, people that have been at the game tend to know where the sweet spot is. So maybe the wildly important goal is first appointments, and the lead measure is asking for referrals. Oh, that I buy.
Right.
right? So the rock's not as big. It's not as big as, right? First appointments is not as big as new accounts, but it's a start. I'll take that. And I'm going to work, referrals off of existing clients, because that's something I can do, and that will move the rock. So really dialing in, because when you first say predictive and influenceable, everybody thinks, oh yeah, that's easy.
I know.
Right? Yeah. Okay. So first appointments, new accounts. No. It's more often than not, it's a little bit of a challenge. And yeah, I like what you said. Getting with people that have been in the game can really help you find a good, winnable game.
Right, because what it comes down to is that sales team or that person that you were saying is not as seasoned of a salesperson, just needs more experience or more skill or more capability to actually be able to move that lever over time. So, like you said, that rock moves.
And they might get there, but that may not be the goal for them. My wife had a personal trainer for a while and just about put her off exercise for good. This woman destroyed my wife. And it's like she was applying levers that were just not in the realm, right? It was disconnected, right? So yeah, for somebody training for an event, it was perfect. But it got my wife off exercise for 3 years, because it was such a traumatic, bad experience.
Right. So I kind of want to reverse it, going back to discipline 1, focus on the wildly important, and talk about setting the proper WIG, or the wildly important goal, as you've already defined here. How do everybody has so many goals, so many things that they want to get done, and so many things they want to accomplish. What are the right questions that we need to be asking ourselves, or within our teams, or within our companies, about how we can actually narrow that focus down to that particular WIG that we've now brought up?
So 2 ideas on this. The first is, there are lots of important, really, really important things in your life that should not be goals. Right? This is a foreign idea to a lot of people. Maybe 80-90% of what I do every day has to be done. But that doesn't mean it's an achievement goal. Right? It could be absolutely mission critical. It's a necessity. It absolutely has to get done.
It's more of a sustainability.
But it's more about sustainability. And so separating all the things in your life that have to be sustained from the one thing, this is what we found. Human beings seem to be able to attack one meaningful achievement goal at a time, in addition to 80 to 90% of the stuff they have to sustain. This is why we call it disciplines, Nick, because nobody wants to do this. It's a little bit like, look, we can give you a formula for achieving anything you want to achieve. The problem is we don't have a formula for everything.
Right.
And so the very first constructs, there's 2 constructs. The first is, I got to put everything in my life, and I want to make improvements all over. I get it. Don't go there. It's going to take up 80% just sustaining getting the food on the table for the kids, getting the groceries bought, you got to do that stuff or things unravel. And you got to be okay that says, look, 80% of my life I'm playing defense. When I go on offense, have a singular focus and say, look, for the next 3 months, right, it's all about this, right? And then in terms of that thing, it cannot stay a concept. The way you get it out of a concept into a target, like this is if you don't remember anything else from this call, people are very bad at executing on concepts, very good at it. A concept was leading the world in space exploration. A target was man on the moon by the end of the decade. We stunk when we were running the concept. We changed the world when we moved to a target. So here it is. What's my starting line? What's my finish line? And by when? And sometimes you really have to wrestle, like being a better parent is the most important thing. Having a relationship with my child. I can't measure that. Yes, you can. Right? Between now and October, I'm going to spend, 400 hours with Sarah one-on-one.
Right.
That, like, you can put this stuff into metrics, and and you could, anyways, if you want to actually, if you're serious, you put it into a target. So those are the two. Separate the one thing from all the stuff you got to sustain. That's the first idea. And then once you've got that one thing, make sure it's a target, not a concept. And that means starting line, finish line, deadline.
All right. So in your own personal life, has there been a time, it could be, back when you first kind of developed this idea, or even more recently, that you've had to do that with your own personal life, not necessarily a team or
all that. And what's funny is I'm an idiot. So it's like there's a couple of authors on this book, right? We all got a job to do. Some of them are really, like Jim Hewling is the embodiment of discipline and execution. And I'm like the loser poster child who does everything wrong. And that's like my job. I'm the kid with the Dallas Morning News published an article called Ritalin Kid Helps Organizations Focus, right? Because I was on Ritalin as a kid. I was so hyper, right? Which is a terrible tendency if you want to execute. But here's what happens. I always do it wrong first. And then I remember, oh no, that stuff you teach, Chris? Right now, I'm into water skiing. And if you know anything about slalom water skiing, they keep increasing the speed of the boat, and you got to get around these falls at an insane speed. So this year, I can do it. Like last year, I may not have been able to pull one out of my hat, but I got one for you right now. Okay. So my lag measure is 6 balls. That's a complete run at 33 miles an hour by the end of the season. Last year I got 5 balls at 32. So I got to get through at 32, and then I got to go. And it doesn't sound like much, but your whole form has to change to do that. That's my lag. Now here are my 2 leads.
Yeah.
Okay. I've got a cardiovascular goal. And for a certain amount of time on an elliptical machine, I have to do that 4 times a week, and I have to be on the water twice a week. And the bet is if I can get my cardio to where I'm hitting that cardio objective 4 times a week, right? It's 2.5 miles in 20 minutes, 4 times a week, and I'm on the water. I'm skiing. I was on the water this morning, and I'm skiing twice a week. I can get that objective.
Right.
So yeah, to tell you exactly. Now, why did I do that? No one made me do that. I don't have to give that to anyone. Why did I do that? Because I really want to ski 6 balls at 33 miles an hour.
Right.
It looks really cool.
Yeah, I love it.
No one but me in this entire world seems to care about it, but I just love it.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. I think it's all, it's a unique, whatever your lag measure is going to be unique to whoever you are.
Man. Right.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I want to get into this. I kind of want to stay here in terms of the scoreboard and the lead measures, because I know that, it might sound easy to this concept of predictability and influenceable.
Yeah.
And then, but if somebody does a lot of work and finally figuring out what their lead measures are, and then they start acting on their lead measures, and then they don't see the lag actually moving because of the lead measure.
There.
How do we figure out if it's a problem with the actual lead measures, or how you're actually assessing or implementing the lead measures?
So in a business setting, this is the first thing we have to teach executives once the game is set up. If the lever isn't moving the rock, okay, and if you're watching this podcast, you might want to record this a couple of times because I'm going to go fast, but I'm going to give you 4 things that go wrong. Okay, so again, what Nick is describing, the lead looks like it's moving. The lag's not moving. So I'm doing the exercise, I'm running, but the weight's not dropping. Or I'm on the water and I've got my cardio up, but I'm not getting new ball. I'm like, it doesn't look like, I thought it was a winnable game. It's not looking like a winnable game. This is a crucial moment. Okay, 4 things. First thing, the lead measure is right conceptually, but you haven't dialed in a lethal dosage. So you got the right idea, you just don't have enough of it. So maybe you had a lead measure around exercise and diet, but you're only cutting 50 calories a day and you're only burning 35. You're like, I'm doing it, but it's not a lethal dosage. So the rules of physics are a bear. You have to move a lever a long way to move a rock a little way. That's the bad news. The good news is the rock moves. If you've ever been on a treadmill, you know what I'm talking about. Like, you've had the worst 30 minutes of your life and you burned off a freaking Snickers bar. You're like, who that came up with these rules, right? Sorry.
Right.
It's the universe, right? I didn't make up the rules. So first thing, did I have a lethal dosage? Before you change to a different strategy. Number one. Number two, did we really move the lead measure? Or did we consciously or subconsciously or accidentally cheat a little bit on the metric? So is the data accurate? Yeah. Did we really get the behavior that we think we're tracking? That's number two. Number three, cause and effect are sometimes separated by time. Certain things you have to do for a while. And I'll bet in exercise physiology, Nick, I bet you see this. There's a period of time where there are no results and the metabolism is changing and the body's going through some weird, and someone's actually gaining weight when they should be losing weight. And what it is it's a lag in cause and effect. So that number three is that, right? Cause and effect are not closely related in time or space. Okay. Yeah. You gotta wait. Okay. So lethal dosage, measuring it wrong, time and space. And number four, you got a bad bet. It's not a good bet. Like you thought that would get you that. And what you're really doing is
So it's just a bad idea all in general.
It's a bad idea altogether. All of your exercise is anaerobic exercise, and that's not giving. You need to change that lead measure, right? You're okay. You're eating way too many carbs. Yeah, you cut this, but something's off in your bet. Mm-hmm. You notice what number that was?
4.
That was the fourth thing you look at, because usually what we've learned is that people's they initially kind of know what to do. Yep. The other ones that get them first.
Yeah, no, that's my whole thing, because I think with health and wellness and fitness and nutrition, it's like, you know what to do for the most part. You're just not doing it because mostly the third one, the cause and effect thing. It's like, and I want you to go here, because I think what you were kind of almost getting into was this idea of confirmation bias, that what you're like thinking, like convincing yourself that it's not working because of a particular reason.
Dude,
so go
that's
into
my
that
new thing. Like I'm on this idea. Okay. All right. So Nick brought up a topic. This idea of confirmation bias is a killer when it comes to personal achievement. It's the death of it. And the term confirmation bias, if you're not familiar, it just means that your brain is wired to see what it believes. So it's why no matter what your political inclination is, people from another political side look kind of stupid to you.
Right.
Like, I don't care. I don't know if you're liberal or conservative, but whichever side you are, the other side looks like they're out of their mind, because all the evidence you see every day, you interpret through a filter. Stephen Covey used to say, we don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are. All right. So without getting too heavy, let me show you how this shows up. It applies to our own behaviors and our own goals. So when we go to do something, we are very good at remembering when we do it. And our brain likes to forget when we don't do it, or when we cheat, or and the way I prove this is I tell a group of people, I may be in front of a group of 1,000 people, and I'll make them raise their hand if they know anybody that's lost 40 pounds deliberately. And almost every hand goes, somebody in their circle of friends knows somebody that's lost 40 pounds. All right, now here's the clincher. Raise your hand if the person you know that lost 40 pounds was counting. They were counting and tracking. All the hands go up. Right. Then I'll say, raise your hand if you know somebody who deliberately lost that weight and wasn't counting. Not a hand will go up. I'll say, okay, just look around you. What just happened? People diet and exercise all the time without tracking. They just don't lose 40 pounds. Mm-hmm. Why? You step on the scale at the end of the week and you think, the scale's busted. I know. I did not eat. Damn it. I didn't eat dessert one time this week. And I worked out twice, maybe 3 times. You know, this metabolism stuff, it doesn't work for me. Or these scales, I think the scales might be wrong. And it's the ugly mirror. So we've applied this to nursing behavior in hospitals by patient satisfaction. They're all convinced they do it. And then they start tracking and they go, like, we know it, but no one is doing it. The same thing. Only 1 out of 5 times we left the room did we ask the patient if there was anything they needed. We thought we did it every time. But what happened? The brain will fool you. That's why you don't know anybody who deliberately lost 40 pounds that wasn't tracking, because your own confirmation bias will undo you.
Yeah, I'm like stirring in my seat right now because of this idea that I have kind of had in my head and it just like the way you said it just kind of confirmed it in a roundabout area. So basically, I completely agree. You know, there's like studies where people are observed from an outside source of like what they eat in terms of like sweets and all this kind of stuff, or just like what kind of foods they eat. And then like a couple weeks down the road, when they're asked, how many times did you have dessert, or how many times did you eat vegetables? They always remember when they had the vegetables.
I want that stuff. Yeah. Yes. Okay. I knew somebody had to have done data on it. We see it so much. So finish the story. What was the correlation between accurate and perception?
The correlation is, it was 100% accurate. It's like people observing from the outside source, like the people who are being tracked didn't know they were being tracked. They were just being observed from an outside source, and they realized that the number of times they had dessert or whatever was X number of times higher than whatever they were recording or saying verbally to the people.
And they're not lying. This is what you have to understand. You think you're being honest with yourself. You might even bet your life on it. Your brain is fooling you. And that's a hard thing for people. That's a hard thing for people to get their head around, that no, what you remember isn't even accurate. That's tough. Hey, I got to show you this. I'm a newcomer to my Apple Watch. Have you seen the little school? You know what this is, right?
I'm not. I actually don't even have an Apple Watch myself.
Okay, so I mean, there's a bunch of these on the market, right?
Right.
So it's telling me right now, it's telling me the green circle is exercise. So I hit the lake this morning. So I got the green circle. The red one is activity, and the blue one is like how much am I standing or sitting too much. And then this sucker, without me even setting it up or doing it, it's tracking me every day. This is like involuntary scoreboarding going on my phone. I found this and I thought, they really knew. Somebody knew what they were doing.
Seriously.
Because and I would have said over the last 8 days, I would have said I was perfect. And you look at that, I am not perfect on this thing. I thought I was like my travel's way down. I'm really focused on this stuff. I'm not there. It's the ugly mirror.
And so this other idea that popped into my head that I've like thought so much about that you just kind of brought back to my attention is that I think, and a lot of times I think about why people don't set more aims, set more goals, and set more intentions. I kind of use those three interchangeably, setting an aim, intention, or a goal. But one of the things that it helps you so much with is that because when you set an aim, you see the progress and it defines what success actually looks like. And it also defines what failure looks like. And I think a lot of people not knowing why they're not setting an aim are not setting an aim because it will actually reveal to them that they're failing at it. So for example, if somebody wants to lose weight and they know they need to track everything, but then they start showing themselves that I have dessert like 6 times a week, it'll reveal to them how much they're failing. And they're like, I don't know if I actually want to do that. So I think that one of the things that holds people back is because failure gets thrown into their face when a goal is set. And some people don't want to be able to see that and made themselves aware of it.
It's a really interesting observation, and one I have not thought enough about, which is what are the resistors that are going on? And maybe, Nick, maybe it's not conscious. Maybe it's sort of right below the water level, right? Maybe it's this subliminal resistance because we know once we're accountable, we have to live with that burden. It's like life with a goal is not as comfortable.
Yeah. Well, I've written about this because, and I was like, so why don't people do it? Because they see they both define what success looks like and what failure looks like. And both kind of like go into the same result into terms of why people aren't setting a goal is because when they see what success looks like, they're like, holy crap, I got to do all that to be able to get to that success. When they see what failure looks like, then they're like, man, I have to change those behaviors in order to get to that goal. And some people aren't. And then the third step is that it's not easy because of those two things that are made aware to you. It's just not easy to actually get to that. So some people are better off just being like, yeah, whatever.
So let's stay on this for a second. One of the things we started to see And there's a book by this title called The Power of Small Wins. Anyone is capable of running a marathon, more or less. But almost, only 1% of the population can walk out their door and run 26 miles, or maybe 1%, right? So, 5 miles of running might be out of the question for me, but 4 I can get to. And so one of the ways that I think we've gotten at the issue that you have is really making it okay to pick small wins. I tell people with teenagers, this is another area where people really struggle. If you have teenagers, I ask people, I say, do you have teenagers? They say, do you have drama? And they just laugh. That's the easiest laugh I get, is asking if they have drama after I ask them if they have teenagers.
Right.
And it's never going to go away. Like, every 2 weeks, they will invent a new soap opera drama that will really, it's never going to go away. And this is the question. Is there some place in that kid's life where that kid is winning? And it can be a little tiny thing, but there has to be something in that life where there's a little bit of a belief and there's a little bit of progress, and it's something that matters to them. And all the drama is like a smoke screen. It ain't going away. And you got to deal with it, and you got to address it. And sometimes it's serious, right? It can drive you nuts. But go to work on a winnable game in the kid's life, and you can watch so many other things change once that thing starts to. But it's like a muscle, right? I mean, the human body is such a beautiful metaphor for everything. So the person that is visualizing failure, if you can get them to scale down, and help them know that even a small win is super meaningful.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important, because you need to fuel your own belief in order to kind of continue to take more action. I don't know if you've ever seen Tony Robbins kind of draw this square, this cycle in terms of taking action and getting results. Is it starts with you have to believe the potential of a particular thing happening in order for yourself to take action. And then if you take action, you see results, which fuels your belief, which increases the potential of that thing happening.
Absolutely. He's looking at the very same thing. We'll tell executives that when they start this process, there will not be a jump in engagement. It's the first time the lead measure moves the lag measure. That's all the executives talk about. Like, they're getting the results. They don't even talk about the results. They talk about, I can't believe the level of engagement we have from people we didn't think cared about this business at all. And human beings, I'll give you another one, Nick. If you read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning.
Yeah,
I love that you've read that. Good for you. This will ruin your weekend. You can read it in a couple of days, but it will read it when everybody's out of town on a rainy weekend, because it's going to ruin your weekend. But everybody needs to read it. And the thing that got me was, he's going into this concentration camp. This is a brilliant psychiatrist who got thrown into a Nazi concentration camp. And he's going to lose everything. He's going to lose his parents. He's going to lose his wife. And he may have to endure torture and death, very, very likely. But here's what's eating him alive. His life's not going to matter. That's why the book's called Man's Search for Meaning. He starts to realize, and it's interesting, the first couple of weeks, he starts to realize that everybody around him, every prisoner around him, has gone almost comatose. Like, they've lost their humanity. They're starting to behave like sheep. With mean dogs. They just move. They started to take on herd behavior, and that this was not happening to him. And he realized that he was still trying to recreate a paper. He had not subjected himself to futility. And when you read Frankl, you realize, go back to the teenager. How important is it for that kid to have something that they're winning at? Even a little success somewhere has a profound effect on everything else. And yet we're not wired that. Like, that's not what people think about.
Right.
When you ask them, like, what do you want in a job? Well, I want good pay. I want a best friend at work. I want good benefits package. I want. And so the teenager will do the same thing. Yeah. I want friends. I want to be popular. I want a new car. I want the new iPhone. I want. But in the end, that stuff there's somewhere where that person is winning. And in your own life, if you're struggling, like carve out something and just test this theory. Just start winning on something. And it can be small, and see if like it doesn't change your whole body chemistry.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I kind of want you to stay on that topic in the sense that what you guys have found through working with so many teams and organizations is that results come first and then engagement comes, because so many different companies and organizations are kind of trying to do it the opposite way around.
Yeah. So when we started, I'm with this team at Frankl & Covey that's on business results. Like we're the serious, right, pointy end of the stick, right?
Yeah.
And then there's all this other stuff at Frankl & Covey, which is like inspiring and life-changing and, you know, all this great human stuff. And we were the results stuff, okay? And so it's not like we didn't love this stuff. That's why we joined the company, but that wasn't our task. We were on the results side. And then we started to see these big pops in engagement. But the engagement was happening after the results, which is a little bit counter to the way I think we think about leadership. I think we think about leadership like, if I can just get these people together, if I can just get them happy, and if I can just, if we can just get along, then we'll produce these great results. And of course, there's truth in that. It's just that in reality, that's not the sequence that normally happens. The team commits to something. It starts to achieve it. And then you see the relationships, then you see the momentum, then you see, but it seems to be maybe not winning or having won, but it's the progress, it's the traction that you're getting that changes morale and engagement. And so we started to realize that this thing we were doing that we thought was just focused on business results had a bigger impact on morale and engagement than anything else we were doing. And then we found the research to back it up. And in the 60s, a guy by the name of Frederick Hertzberg said, oh, look, there's 20 reasons people will quit you. But engagement is not the opposite of turnover. Don't address the 20 reasons people quit you if you want to try. You got to address that stuff because you don't want them to quit. But that's not where your engagement's going to come from.
Right.
It's going to come from, is that person winning at something meaningful? But they don't look for it. We're not as human beings, we're not always smart enough to go there when we feel broken or disengaged.
Right. No, I think that's awesome. And I think it's a huge thing for you guys to be able to find and communicate. So I think, you know, I didn't relate this to the Tony Robbins thing until you just said it, but you
did a perfect job. That's it, man.
It just fuels their belief, right? Because they believe so much, then they're engaged. So what I want to start with it, or what I want to ask then is, how can you, as much as possible, make people believe in the beginning? Like, how do you enroll them in your vision that, as a leader, that this is going to be something that's good for your company, especially if the company's already, you know, because you've worked with really good companies who've already, you know, are really successful in the grand scheme of things. So how do you enroll them in the vision to make them believe as much as possible initially on, before the results come, that this is going to work for them?
It's so funny. So ironically, the short answer is you can't. But watch what happens, but we still get there.
Okay.
So there's sort of a bell curve spectrum of early adopters and late adopters. And what we tell the leaders is, you're going to have to carry the water until this thing gets traction. And we tell the leaders, it's not how you sell it up front. All the rah-rah, the t-shirts, the posters, they'll smile, they'll laugh, they'll forget about it that afternoon. It's gone. Right? And leaders always think, if I could just be more inspiring, man, if I could just sell this thing, if they could just see how passionate I am. And we're telling them, it doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter it doesn't matter about the flowery language and the goal. And it doesn't matter about the fact that somehow your business result is going to change the world. And it's like heresy when you say this stuff. And the point is this: it doesn't matter how you launch the game, but it does matter how you play the game. So when you're on a team, powerful. We say, look, you got about 12 weekly revolutions you got to turn, and you got to have the muscle to do it. Until it's like priming a pump. You got to pump for a long time. You may have to pour water down it. You're going the other direction, right? Until the water starts to come back up. But here's the other side of winnable game, high stakes game. So in a team dynamic, the leader has to send the message that this little thing we carved out really matters. Even if there's just a lot of stuff going on in a day job that's driving us crazy, when they start to realize, boss is really serious about this. It's a high stakes game. Like, people love the playoffs, they hate preseason. It's a high stakes game. Then all of a sudden, the leads start to move, and it's them that are moving the leads. This isn't the boss's game. This is their game. We picked that. Hey, and that thing we picked is moving that thing. And we didn't ever think you could move that thing because we were blaming it on 4 other departments. But son of a gun, we're moving that thing. And this is cool. And I'm now part of a winning team. And all of a sudden, all the late adopters start to come on board. So it happens in a swing. Now, the challenge, and I can hear it as I'm saying this to you, Nick, is that you're able to do that in a setting where you're able to sort of pull people along. And when it comes to individual goals and individual achievements, that's a trickier question.
Right.
They don't have to, like, the organizations we work with, they have to play along. If they want to keep their jobs, they get to define the game, but they don't get to choose not to play a game.
Right. So it's almost like, because I'm in the job, it's got to be high stakes, whether I necessarily believe it or not.
Right. And I support it, but they sort of, over the first few weeks, they sort of get sucked up in it. Mm-hmm. And people that were resistors actually will become promoters if it's done right. And we've gotten really good at doing this. But I always think about it on an individual. I have 7 children, right? And the joke is we could have passed the Breakfast Club. Like, if you've ever seen that movie, like, I got the jock, I got the cheerleader, the hippie, the rebel, I got them all, right? It's like, and they all look different too, right? I got the full cast. And so, you're always looking at it, and sometimes they engage when they want to. So it's an interesting dynamic, but high stakes winnable game, it's a pretty good place to start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. And you talk a lot, you work with a lot of teams and organizations and companies, but as we've talked about today, it's very implementable into your own personal life. So do you feel like, do you feel like that's maybe the hardest challenge? So, like, I know right now I've started the process. I've just finished the book and getting into this and everything. I've started the process and working through it. So
I want to know what you learn with your clients, Nick.
Yeah.
Like, I want more. We have these anecdotal personal stories, but we never do research on the personal ones. So I would love any data that you've got as you watch. Because if you look at exercise programs, if you look at Weight Watchers, the best weight loss program, Orange Theory that's out there, boy, the 4 disciplines are very visible in a lot of programs. So, but I think by accident. I don't know that people have deliberately done it. So if you start going down that road, I would love to know what you find.
Oh, I definitely will. Believe me, this is good. This has been like a huge game changer for me. But what I was actually getting at is that I'm going to go through the process myself in terms of, like, defining my own wig and going step by step from there. So from your own experience going it through with yourself, what are maybe the challenges that I'm going to go through in trying to do this for myself? Because when other people are going to listen to this, they're going to get the book, they're going to read it, they're going to want to go through it themselves too. What are the biggest challenges that they're going to go through, and how can they work through that?
All right. So remember, these are not the 4 good ideas of execution.
Right.
They are the 4 disciplines of execution. And I wish I had coined this phrase, but another speaker named Jim Rohn said that the pain of regret is worse than the pain of discipline.
Yep.
But there is pain involved in this. Okay, now, biggest problem. Self-accountability is kind of a joke. All right, the whole word accountability means you are accountable to someone else. We have this way of cutting ourselves slack that is really unhealthy. We'll do it later. We'll do it tomorrow. There were extenuating circumstances. That whole confirmation bias thing, if you want to get at that, and that's the goal killer, you've got to have accountability and a high stakes game. And that means you got to have a partner, Nick. Mm-hmm. So you got to find somebody who wants a goal in their life as bad as you want a goal in your life. And you got to lock arms. And why is Weight Watchers so much more effective than so many other things? The thing's hinged on accountability.
Right.
Like all the best targeting in the world doesn't do you any good if there isn't some, I mean, like we have these meetings where we'll have somebody go, I was not going to go to that meeting. without that done. I made the commitment. They'll stay up till 2 a.m, but they don't want to let a peer down. And it's believe it or not, it's more effective in a peer relationship than in a boss relationship. But if you have somebody that's taking time out of their day to report to you and you report to them, you will not want to say that you didn't get it done.
Right.
And that's so much smaller than the benefit of actually doing the activity. I don't know why this works. It doesn't make any sense, except it does. So there's a big one. So rule number 1, have an accountability partner.
Okay.
Rule number 2, don't cheat and have multiple goals, Nick. I know you're going to want to. I don't even have to ask you. You've already cheated. You got 3 right now, and you're debating on a 4th. Stop it. 1, man. Learn the process on 1 and really learn the process. Okay? And don't go super high level. Go something tactical, winnable. Don't go a full year out. Sometimes businesses have to, but I like to go shorter time frames. Go shorter time frame, go specific, run the disciplines with an accountability partner.
Okay. And the accountability, like we mentioned earlier, it's really important that you communicate with the accountability partner basically everything, right? The phrase you like to use is X to Y by when, right? They have to know what that is for you so that you actually work on, moving the lead measures.
Yeah. And why did you choose the lead measure? And how are you actually tracking them? And when does it count? And when does it not count? And like in football, a first down is a lead measure. Down and distance is the lead measure to points, which are the lag measure. It's a perfect analogy. And it ain't somewhere between 9 and 11 yards. It's 10 yards for your punting, right?
Yeah.
And so that level of rigidity in the game, any game you play, the rules are not fuzzy. I use the word game very deliberately. You want to see ridiculous amounts of engagement. Get somebody into game mentality. That's where we think the game's trivialized. They don't. They breed engagement.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. And so I want to mention one thing in terms of what I found helps me hold myself more personally accountable. Because accountability partner is huge, especially for that most important goal. But we can't have an accountability partner for every single thing that we do in our day or anything like that. But what I found for me, and this is kind of stupid, but like on my whiteboard, next to everything I'm supposed to do, I have like an open box that I need to check off. And like if there's an open box left at the end of the day, I'm just like stirring. I'm like, come on, I got to get it done. But then to kind of backtrack is I always write the things down that I need to do the night before, because I think that when we write things down in a certain amount of time before we need to do them, we have a little bit more clear sight in terms of we're prioritizing more properly if we do it ahead of time. Because when we get closer and closer to whatever that thing is, we give ourselves more and more reasons why maybe that's not the right priority, because of maybe it could be super tough to follow through with.
I was just talking to someone, so interesting you're saying that, Nick. I was just talking to someone the other day, and they were telling me their ability to keep a promise to themselves goes up dramatically if they will actually go through the process to write it down. And it's really interesting. Now I'm hearing this twice inside the same week. I'm gonna look at that. I'm gonna do that in my own life. The night before. I like that. It's a really good idea. I'm gonna spell out exactly. There's a book you might like called The Checklist Manifesto.
Okay.
They talk about how it has to do with the way the brain's wired and all of the things in life that work because of sort of that checklist mentality.
Okay. Gotcha. I love it. Yeah, I think, and then honestly, the other thing in terms of simplicity, what I realized simplicity wise is if I almost need to have I don't have it every single one, but I almost need to have the X to Y by when. I need for like each thing that I write down. If I don't know,
all right.
If each of these things, I don't know exactly when I started them and I don't know exactly when I finished them, then it gives me that leeway of like, maybe I did enough. So for example, sometimes I just put a time, like 10 minutes of this particular thing. And if it's not a time, then it needs to just be like, there's an ending. I know I'm done with it. And then I can check it off. If I don't know when I'm done, then it's like, okay, I did enough.
Dude, I don't know what you're going to choose to do in life, but I bet money on you If you ever start a company, will you call me as a potential? And I may not have a lot of money, but I will invest in you, man. Let me just stay on what Nick said for just a second. We talked about lag measures. We talked about lead measures. We talked about scoreboarding, and we talked about accountability weekly. The one thing we haven't mentioned today is that in that weekly accountability, and this is maybe the most important thing of the whole thing, there is weekly commitments that are made that are not the same as the lead measure. So my lead measure may be to run a certain number of miles. It may be to eat a certain number of calories, but the commitments are the things I do every week to ensure I do the lead measures. So I'm going to get the gym membership because it's going to be so hot this week. I know I'm not going to run in that heat. And I'm going to get the new shoes, and I'm going to go sign up for that nutrition program. And what can I do? And you'll be surprised. Every week you'll think of stuff I'm going to get a running partner for Thursday. There'll be stuff you can do that will hedge your bet. Now, what Nick just said that was super important is that stuff needs to be as specific as, even though it's a task, the more specific the task is. We have exercises where we have executives write out a specific commitment versus a general commitment. So they'll start like, I'm going to work on training this week. I'm going to train Martha and Nick on front desk procedures for 30 minutes by Friday morning at noon.
Boom.
Like the difference between work on training and the second thing I said, which I don't think I can repeat, is quantum. And we can tell you, this all tracks in a software system. We can tell you by looking at the commitments whether or not an organization is going to execute or not.
Mm.
So great, Nick. Your instincts are. I mean, I'm pulling this from. Your instincts are spot on. I'm seeing 17 years of examples and pain around it. But yeah, you're getting to the point.
Yeah, the commitments thing was big for me too, and that's kind of where the commitments is where you hold yourself accountable to. Right. That's because
that's right. That's the thing you got to, right? Because up until the commitment, everything else is just talk. The commitment's where something actually happens.
Have you found that with teams, like once I just think that it's so important that when you follow through, like this all goes through the phrase that I started off with, and you've mentioned a couple of times now, following through the promises that you make to yourself. It's that once you kind of get in that rhythm, you kind of build a reputation with yourself and the people with that you're making the commitments with, that you're going to keep doing it. So I'm trying to derive the question that I want out of this is that when is it kind of like almost a snowball effect with certain teams that like maybe early on because they haven't bought in completely, so I'm not following through with the commitments, and then all of a sudden like they gain more steam, and then all of a sudden everybody's following through with the commitments, and then it just starts rolling. Like, have you found that?
I got to tell you, all you got to do is watch a kid in high school. One of my daughters. And it's not uncommon for our family, right? We tend to do better in college than high school, and it's the whole extended family. We're really late to the game usually, and incentives, rewards, none of it matters. Penalties, punishments, none of it matters. We had some intense accountability last fall with two of my daughters. That every week they had to report they had to write down their current averages and their grade averages, and then their homework assignments, what they call in Georgia formative scores, or they didn't get their phones. So if Sunday night those scores are not recorded, I get the phones. Okay. Parents have leverage on kids today, like it never existed before. It's so easy.
Yeah.
So Sarah, started really strong. This is her sophomore year of high school. Started to get A's and B's for the first time, and would not let that go. Once she had, it's a snowball effect. Once she had that momentum, she would kill herself not to get behind. She didn't want to give up the win.
Wow.
And so this is part of what we see. Once a team gets out ahead, once they feel like they're achieving. See, otherwise, if you haven't achieved yet, you can always put it off. You can put it off. Once there is something that's been gained, boy, I see people really hate to give that up. In weight loss, they do give it up.
Yeah.
And, you do see people go backwards. But I tell you, in our world, we've seen a lot of examples where there's good visibility and they know what to do. They don't want to give up the past wins. I know it's a long explanation around that, but what you were saying, I definitely know is part of it. I saw that in my own life. I was a horrible student until the first time that I got good grades, and then I'd kill myself not to go back. So I know tangibly what that feels like.
Right, but like you said, it does happen with weight loss, and I think it happens probably with more things too, because people get like complacent with the work that they've already put in and get a little bit lazy with maybe some of like the particular action steps that it takes in the 4 disciplines, or that people have taken up to that point that they've seen their success.
And distracted, I'll tell you, that is a huge one. It's a little word. We all think we can just muscle through it. The one thing we haven't talked about is how the human being responds to urgency.
Yep, I wanted to get it there, the urgency versus importance.
Right. And the power of the 4 disciplines is that it makes something that will never be urgent. I can always do it tomorrow. My diet starts tomorrow. Later. Yes. I can't wait. But next week. Because I got all this stuff right now. And once I get that out of the way, of course, I'll be able to do it. It makes it as urgent as all the distractions. And matter of fact, maybe that's all we're doing. Maybe all we're doing with the disciplines. Maybe all Weight Watchers does. Maybe all the constructs around 4 disciplines and Orange Theory. Maybe all these do. Maybe all they do is just balance the urgency scale. Because there's still a little caveman living in here. Right? So all the cerebral stuff going on up front always gets nixed as soon as the phone rings or someone comes to the door, or, oh, I forgot I got to do that. And then urgency just kills the important thing.
Yeah.
And I'll bet if you go back and look at people that went backwards on weight loss and went backwards on other things, and you really looked closely, you'd see that in the moment, they weren't losing to stupidity, laziness. They were losing to busy.
Right. So when you're saying that like the 4 disciplines and Orange Theory might make the important things seem urgent, and so they do them. That's
right. Maybe that's all that's going on. I've thought about this a lot. Because I look at this stuff. I look at these disciplines and I go, really? Like applying them is hard. Like we've got the best consultants because they sound simple. When you go to apply them, everybody's heads explode. But at the end of the day, when you see, like you're from Georgia, when you see a 60% reduction in child maltreatment, child abuse across the state of Georgia back in 2006, this is what did it? Like you can't believe the power of this stuff. But I think it comes down to that one idea that urgency is such a poison to execution. That if we compensate for that, if the important stuff now feels urgent, we actually do it.
Okay. Yeah. And so I'm familiar with the distinguishment between the two because of reading your stuff. But for people who are not necessarily sure or know exactly what we're talking about, what is the difference between urgency and
urgent and importance? It's funny you say this because I used to talk to my dad about this. And he was a contractor whose hair was on fire. Like he was the embodiment of the whirlwind, right? And he could not get the idea that there's a difference. Urgency is anything acting on you right now, regardless of how important it is. Stuff's coming at you. And now with these blasted things, it's coming. And with these, right, we're going to have one around our throat here pretty soon, right? It's just going to choke us out every time we ignore the text message.
Right.
Right. So that stuff is just on us. Like, so here's how I tell people. You're in the middle of the most important project of the year. Your career depends on it. You're under a debt. All of a sudden, you just answered a phone. Somebody sent you a text. You just watched a video and you're like, am I out of my mind? Why did I just do that? Oh, I got to go get, and you acted on it because it was coming at you. It was urgent. Mm-hmm. Somebody asked you a question right then. And that stuff wasn't nearly as important. So the important stuff is always at the mercy of the urgent. And we tend not, here's the last point. We tend not to think this is too big a deal because we can do something I call tendency override.
Yeah.
And we can say, oh, I'm going to get back on course, right? But what you don't realize is that you're fighting that tendency all the time. And some of us get better at it, but that's really what Weight Watchers, Orange Theory, 4 Disciplines of Execution, right? These things that really work on behavior, they cut through the urgency. Otherwise, and that's why focus is so important, right? Because if you've got half a dozen things you're trying to do, the distractions totally kill you.
Yeah. Well, before I go to, I don't know if I didn't, people listening who go to my Orange Theory classes, I didn't tell you before I'd coach at Orange Theory.
Shut up.
So, yeah.
You do those?
Yeah.
Ben, I swear, I didn't know. I was just like searching my brain.
Yeah.
What's like this?
That's hilarious.
And Weight Watchers and those, they all the principles of the 4 disciplines, like we did not invent these principles. The principles have always been there, but they're in that stuff.
But I think that it's really telling and
hilarious.
Eye-opening to me because I've been able to point out things that I know Orange Theory does well and why it's exploded and why it's doing so well. But that concept right there of making the important things urgent is huge for me. But so I want to stay right there because I think it's so important because I realize the same thing. Sometimes when I like answer a text, I'm like, son of a, like, what was I doing?
What was I doing? Am I out of my mind?
Right. And so one of the biggest strategies, I guess, for me to like help just that smallest thing was to most of the time have my phone on Do Not Disturb. So it doesn't just flash up.
Yeah, you got to build mechanisms. I'm with you on this.
Yeah, well, so that's what I want to ask you. Are there particular things that you've done in your life outside of, because you can't but 4 disciplines to every single thing that you do. So what are maybe some of the different strategies that you've done in your life and implemented to make the important things seem urgent, if you will?
So here's what I find. If you apply the 4 disciplines as a disciplined approach to one thing, the principles bleed into other stuff naturally.
Okay.
But if you try and build the whole operating system around multiple things, it implodes under its own weight. It's too much. So the formal methodology applied just to one thing, but you start to develop discipline muscles that pay off. You'll just start thinking about, okay, what's the lead indicator for that? Maybe I don't track it, but I think that way. And all right, instead of just saying, I'm going to work on this, what do I actually want to have done by Wednesday? And so you'll find that behaviorally, that stuff will start bleeding into other aspects of your life and it'll pay dividends. I'll tell you, and it's funny, I tell people this and nobody is surprised. I really want someone to be surprised one day when I tell them I had a raging case of hyperactivity attention deficit disorder. And that's it. Nobody's ever been surprised. Usually gets me a laugh.
That's hysterical.
But people with ADD or ADHD is actually what it's called, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. ADHD or ADD for that matter, they don't write books. They don't write books. Like that might be one of the ways you know you have it is if you've never written a book. We published in 2012. I started in 07. Threw away the first 100 pages. Started over again. Jim Hewling was like the 3rd writer.
Right.
That I worked with, right?
He took the ADHD out.
What's that?
I said he was the one who took out the ADD in you.
Yeah. He was the solvent. He was the neutralizer. The reason I say this is I had to have mechanisms. So I would lock myself. I would drive to my sister's house. I would leave my house, drive to my sister's house. She had a room in the basement, which was like an attention deficit chamber.
Yeah.
And I would lock myself in there. And sometimes 2 hours just meant one paragraph.
Wow.
But a paragraph got written.
Yeah.
And I had an assistant that was like, she would block a day a week and she wouldn't let anything get on that calendar. And it's like, know your enemy, right? We've seen the enemy and it is us. Like if you know that, you can compensate for it. You can write a book with attention deficit disorder. Mm-hmm. And it's not like I got more willpower. Like that willpower thing, that burns out in a couple of weeks.
Right.
You got to build processes.
Mm-hmm. So I want to, you said you started writing the book in 2007, came out in 2012. Obviously some of that was maybe the ADHD, but some of it was is probably fine tuning the actual disciplines and the practice and implementing them and stuff like that. So when you started off teaching other people, other teams, other organizations, teaching yourselves about this, what were some of the major aha moments for you that was like, oh, we need to fine tune here. This is the adjustment that we need to make. So what were some of those things early on in the process that you realized that you needed to maybe change?
So Sean Covey and Jim Stewart were the original creators of the construct. There were elements of it in a course we called Aligning Goals for Results. The basic framework of the disciplines was alive in that far back as 2001. But as an organization, we weren't doing much with it. And I got on board by 2003. And I put a lot of energy behind this process. And then by 2008, 2009, I had taken over this practice. So I wasn't the originator of the methodology. But for me, when I came on board, Jim, he passed away 10 years ago. He was the man. Like Jim had like that extra gift. Oh, he's a mean sucker, but he was good at this. And he'd tell me to shut up in front of my own clients, and I would. Like, he worked for me, and I was scared to death of him. He was an old Conoco oil guy, Deming Duran quality TQM guy. And Jim really got good at goal definitions. I was like, let's take discipline 2. We've been here for 6 hours. And it's like they didn't have it yet. So we really, really getting good on the art and science of defining the aim, the target. That, I started to respect that. That was a key point.
Huh.
I remember where I was with Jim when we defined predictive and influenceable. And somebody pointed out, Doug Pusey pointed out, that what we were describing was leverage. And they gave it a name. A lever is influenceable and it's predictive. And that's what we're defining as leverage, right? That was a big moment.
Yeah.
The way the WIG sessions worked, the notion of do they feel like preseason or do they feel like playoffs? It's still football. Football's
high
football.
Stakes.
But preseason football and playoff football, that's different. Like, why? Because if you lose in the playoffs, you go home. All right. Nobody cares about preseason because there's no accountability. There was this relationship between engagement and accountability, which people didn't think went together, but they do. So those were just a few of the themes that we started. And then we test stuff. So everything we thought we knew, the next client would adopt. And then they'd come back and tell us, look, it's not going to be one big win. It's going to be a bunch of little wins. We're like, oh, yeah. And by the way, your 4 disciplines, don't try and apply it to everything. It only works on the stuff that needs human energy. Oh, right. And if you can get it done without that, go do it, right? You can spend money and get it done. If you can change your process and get it done, do it that way. This methodology is for the hard stuff. So to me, those are the things that jump out when you said that.
I liked it. I like it. So one thing I want to make sure I touch on is you're working on another book coming out, right? Kind of on I'll let you go into that. It's called Leading Execution. Is that what it's going to be called?
Yeah, very good. Thanks, Dick.
So what's going to be in that book that's not currently in this book?
That book is really going to be aimed at leaders of leaders. It's interesting. The dynamics change. 4 Disciplines was really written for the leader of a team, for the leader of a cell. But leaders that are good leaders of cells, they don't stay there for long. They become leaders of multiple cells.
Right.
So you're not over a cell anymore. You're over 12 cells or 140 cells. And those cells might all have different lead and lag measures. Like, how do you execute once you get higher up in an organization? And this is really, there's another side of execution. And it's all the stuff that we've had to learn through trial and error around how do you keep all the cells, the actions at the cell, right?
Yeah.
Right. How do you keep all those cells healthy and functioning and fire, right? Or cylinders in an engine, right? How do you keep all those cylinders firing if you're the leader? So I don't know if it'll be a long book. Right now, it feels like a lot of content.
Yeah.
And we're not fast with writing books. We bang our heads around and we have lots of examples, and I can't even tell you when it's going to come out. Hopefully within the year, but I can't.
It seems like I've talked with a few people on my show now who have written books, a number of people now who have written books, and it seems like I like to ask them like how you go about writing it, and it seems like there's a couple different strategies. Like some people go away and like it is the absolute only thing that they're focused on, right? But some people kind of chip away at it as well. So it sounds like you're going more the the chip away process.
Here's the thing. This isn't a novel, and it isn't up here.
Oh, you're still constantly learning about it.
Well, and yeah, here's what you had. This is what Stephen Covey, who's the founder of our organization. I mean, Covey got one thing and never let go of it. And what he got was the principles are external from you. There are laws, and then this world likes to forget this sometimes.
Yeah.
We don't get to make up the laws. There are laws in this universe, and we think we're in charge. Listen, that plane doesn't fly because it wants to fly. It flies because it obeys the principles of lift, thrust, weight, and drag. Otherwise, it crashes, and it doesn't care how many people are on board.
Right.
Right?
I love that.
And I gave away all my political views just now. The principles are right, eternal truth.
Yeah.
Right. And focus, leverage, engagement, and accountability. We didn't invent that stuff. Right. All we're doing is studying the application. Right. If you're an airline designer and you want to understand, like we know a lot more about lift, thrust, weight, and drag than the Wright brothers did. Right. That's all we're doing. So we're applying, all right, lift, thrust, or focus, leverage, engagement, and accountability now up a level.
Yeah.
And we'll know when we get there, kind of thing. So yeah, it's not, Jim and I couldn't, and Sean, we couldn't just give birth to this thing now, even at gunpoint. It's still baking.
Mm-hmm. No, I like that you said that. I don't think I've ever thought in the sense that, like, I've kind of known it, but when you
that's right. You know it, right? That's why I love Covey. I never thought of it. Covey got that in our heads. Look, and that's why he was so adored by other cultures around the world, because they had truth was universal. These weren't cultural. They went deeper than values. Your values are subjective. The principles are objective.
Mm-hmm. It's like the simple things that somebody actually puts terms to. That's like, oh, I've been thinking that all along.
The beginning of wisdom is the definition of terms.
Boom, boom. So before we got on the show, I appreciate you doing this. Kind of wanted to be as valuable to all my listeners as possible. And we talked about how becoming the best version of yourself, it's a unique thing, and we're all going to find that in our different ways. So we talked about personal performance, and obviously we talked about you've worked with a lot of organizations, a lot of teams, a lot of companies, and you've learned a lot about working together with groups of people. But what have you learned in terms of working with organizations about increasing and maximizing personal performance?
All right. I got to lift Covey on this one. Because I can take a shot at it, but I got to go with the master. All right. Can I do it in a story?
Yeah, please.
Right, maybe it's good, but maybe it's a good one to end on right here.
Yeah.
All right. So circa 1991, right? I am the unpaid intern, not supposed to be there. I'm a stowaway on this ship. Okay.
Yeah.
They're going to find me out any moment now. One of the things I used to like to do with all my freedom at work, because I had no real job responsibilities.
Right.
Is I used to go up to the mountains, which is about 30 minutes from our headquarters in Utah. The mountains are right there. And Robert Redford's resort, Sundance, was up there. And Covey once a month would have CEOs from all over the world that would come to what was called principle-centered. Like that was his thing. Principle-centered leadership week. Mm. And he'd soak them for a week in this notion of figure out best practices are a dime a dozen, figure out the principles. So they've had this week. They're in the mountains. It's beautiful. They've gotten out of their heads a little bit. Last day, he's got them, and he has them do this thing called the tomato plant exercise. They're at the picture, a group of executives, maybe about 60 folks in the room, all at tables. And he has them, each table, come up with everything they would do to grow a world-class tomato. And these executives think it's a brainstorming creativity exercise. So they're going at it. Greenhouses and agricultural ideas and chemicals. And somebody had read an article on something. And so they're kind of competing with each other to see who can come up with the best list for growing a world-class tomato. And he has them report out. They all each one of them tells their plan. And then he goes in a different direction with them. And he asks them, can you guarantee can you guarantee the tomato will grow? All the stuff that you did, can you guarantee it? And they had to admit, no, we cannot guarantee it. And he would ask them, why? Give me the reason why. He said, I knew what you were going to say. I knew you couldn't guarantee it. Why can't you guarantee it? And each table knew the answer. And the answer was, because life is in the seed. All that stuff that you do does not put life in the seed. The life is in the seed. And he would tell them, if you're a leader, your job is not to put life in the seed. Your job as a leader is to create the conditions for success. Right? But never forget, the life is in the seed. That's the farmer's principle. And like for some of these people, this was a life-changing, coming out of a mechanical mindset, an ego, my results, my organization. No. Your job, if you're really interested in leadership, your job is to create the conditions for success, but the life is in the seed.
Right. And so I'm going to botch this. So pick me up where I fall off here. I don't know if it's his definition for leadership, but he talks about leadership as being able to inspire people so that they see it within themselves. Or what do you know what that phrase is? I'm dropping something off.
Now, who is it? Who
I'm
says
pretty
this?
sure it's Stephen Ark. It's Stephen.
Stephen Covey. Yeah. He talked a lot about finding their own voice.
Yeah.
And about the overlap between to live, to love, to learn, to leave a legacy. That there was this, right? Can you believe in them enough that they can see their own potential?
Yeah, that was where I was going.
And this to him, if you moved it from tomato plants to an actual person, this is what he would tell you. You really do as a leader. These are the conditions for growth. And so that's right. I guess that's the final part of it, right? Can you really overlap those needs in a way that allows someone? He called it. Sometimes he would refer to it as the fire within. That you get banging on all four of those cylinders. You really find there's something there. And he was very optimistic about what people were capable and what the potential was.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Well, down to the last couple of questions, I always ask the same last two to all my guests. And this one is a little bit more putting you on the spot because you're so big on setting goals and stuff. So I always start with asking the age question. So how old are you currently?
52.
52. Okay, cool.
I have the body of a 51-year-old.
That's hysterical. So 10 years down the road, you're going to be 62 and hopefully have the body of a 61-year-old. What does 62-year-old Chris McChesney look like? What are you currently doing? And what have you done and accomplished?
That's a really good question. And thank you, by the way, for asking that. That's a Stephen Covey question if I've ever heard one. I'd like this work to be about 50% of my life. And I'd like to be doing some work for my church. And I'm not, there are people that are better at service than me and other things like that, but there's just a particular component that I'd like to be able to give some more time to. I think I'll be into the grandchild game. I've got a couple daughters that got married this year.
Oh, congrats.
I see myself doing a lot more of that. And there's a book, a non-business book that I'd like to be, and it might take the form of a book and it might take the form of a series of videos, but I really would love to do some work on picking up some work on a topic called intelligent design. And it's the how many markers there are for a divine creator in the work that's being done in quantum physics, and I'd like to start compiling that. So there's a number of sort of more, I don't know, different topics I'd like to be. And so I don't know if that's a great question, but
no, I like it.
A little more church, a little more maybe grandkids, and then into this topic of intelligent design.
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect. And I think literally the reason why I asked that question is because I need to make sure I'm working on that myself. And it all comes down to what we've talked about all episode, is being able to find something, because then it creates the game and you know kind of whether or not you're getting closer or whether or not or if you're not.
And even if the thing that you pick 10 years from now, Nick, and I tell my kids this, isn't where you actually stand 10 years from now, you're going to stand at a really cool place that wouldn't have existed if you hadn't picked somewhere. Exactly. So it may take you somewhere you didn't intend to go, but having a target will get you somewhere.
Yeah. And I'm going to get to the last question, but I think it's really important because I've always known that. And to me, I've said it to myself as you need to be willing to be flexible with certain things. Like you only know so much. Like I don't know all the answers. So while I set a goal or set an aim,
right?
Who am I to say that that's even the right goal or the right aim? So you have to be willing to be flexible. But Stephen M. R. Covey, in my interview with him, he said it's always a balance of creation and detection.
Say it again, creation and detection. Yeah. That's why I said I can't tell you when the book's going to be done, because there's so much detection involved in that.
Yeah, I think that's so super important for us to be able to realize, because if you're all hell bent on one thing, then you're going to miss some other things along the way. But before I ask the last question, I want to acknowledge you for a number of things, but for really your consistent work on this for so long, because I think I've always preached to myself and to others as much as I can the power of consistency. And for you to be able to work, like you started on this kind of in 2003, you said, and now it's 2019, and you've constantly.
I have ADD.
Yeah, but and that was the other thing, to be cut in, like since you have the ADD or whatever, you've been able to, stay focused enough to be able to constantly learn and constantly be flexible and not always say like this is the way, and if it's not working for that company, it's you guys and the willingness to be flexible and to adapt and to detect those certain things. So I really acknowledge you for that, and then your future goals of wanting to go on to some different things and support your church and support your kids and grandkids a little bit more. I think that's awesome.
Thanks.
But tell everybody where they can find a little bit more about you, learn more about you and the book and everything like that.
All right. Yeah. So 40xbook.com, or you can just go to the Frankl Covey website on execution.
Okay. And are you on social media at all, or?
Yeah. Or just hit me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
And we do, by the way, we're doing one-day masterclasses, full-day execution masterclasses around the country. And so if you want to hit me on LinkedIn, we'll get you the it's Chris McChesney, and we'll get you let us know. We'll get you the cities and the locations, and Nick, I appreciate the opportunity, and this has been awesome. It's been really great talking to you. I'm excited to see where your life goes. I'm gonna follow you.
Of course. Well, I appreciate it. So the last question, we've touched on probably a number of things that you might go to here, but it's called Best You Podcast. I'm all about defining on how to become the best version of yourself. And like I mentioned beforehand, reverse engineering that. So what I want to ask, and so I also believe it's a very unique journey. The way that I'm going to become the best version of myself is going to be different than the way that you become the best version of yourself. And I also believe it's a constant journey. We're always working towards that person. So what I want to ask for you personally is if you could currently work on or do 3 things to get closer to that best version of yourself. What are 3 things that you could currently do or currently work on?
If I can every day carve out 15 to 20 minutes with scriptures, and if you're not religious, that could be wisdom literature. It lowers my blood pressure, my anxiety level. It just grounds me as a human being. If I could do that more consistently, it would have a big impact. That's number one. That's the first thing right off the bat. Number 2 is block a little bit of time in the morning before I just attack all the urgency. I got a good friend right now that he does not schedule anything before 9 a.m. And he's up at like 6:30, and he's got a whole bunch of stuff he gets done. And he has this, right? I think it's a really healthy way to live. Is with that in mind. And then the third thing, I am going to get out of my hotel room when I'm in foreign cities. I am all over the earth and I don't see anything. I want to go like Bill Murray. Like he just goes around and meets people. Like that's all he does. I'm just going to go meet people, places, like not be so locked in. Like when I get to my hotel room, I'm just going to get out and I may get mugged or stabbed or something. But I'm going to go out. So I'm going to reading scriptures or wisdom literature, get some space in the morning and get out of my hotel room and meet some people.
Well, for get out of your hotel room, create a game out of it. How many people can you meet?
I got it. There it is. That would really lend itself. I could kind of have a whole Where's Waldo theme or something I could do. Like the interesting person with each trip kind of.
There you go. There you go. Well, that's awesome. Well, that's all we got. I appreciate your time, Chris. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Nick. Great interview. Appreciate it, buddy. Take care.